Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about a tough topic. I want to talk about how adverse childhood events or trauma in our childhood can affect our health in adulthood. And I want to talk about that in general and specifically when it's come to my health. I've done a lot of research in this area over the years. However, I'm going to speak very generally today, basically because I haven't read many of the research papers, like reread them in the last couple of years, and so I don't want to get any specific facts wrong. I do have one paper pulled up, and so I can provide details, at least some places where you can look to verify the stuff that I'm telling you, because that's important. Especially, you know me, this is a very small channel, I'm a real person. So the likelihood of me feeding you, horrible, misleading information is less. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong. So it's always good to check people, especially in today's day and age. A video like this could be fake. I could be like not a real person. Thankfully I am. And so I could just tell you something to sell a product or something. So I just want to make you aware of that. I've seen videos with people where they have like shadows like this and their fingers look normal and they're not real. So just be aware of that. I'll get off I'll stop talking about that and I'll start talking about what I want to talk about today. And I want to talk about how in my research, what I have found is the biggest risk factor for having an autoimmune disease in adulthood is being abused as a child. That is the biggest risk factor. And they have done research and they've shown the higher number of adverse childhood events you have, and these are defined as anything from physical abuse to emotional abuse. They have a whole list of what these ACEs or adverse childhood events could be. But the more of them that you have, the higher the risk you have of having an autoimmune disease. In, I guess it was 2005, I believe, or 2004, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And so I had problems with my health for several years before that, where, I was just getting sick a lot. I was having a hard time not using all my sick days at work. By that time, I had moved out to Iowa and I was in the PhD program. And I had just gotten married to my daughter's father. And my legs went completely numb from like the knee down. And then it started ascending, and then it was from the thigh down, etc. They tested me, diagnosed me with transverse myelitis, which is basically a demyelinization of the spine. It's autoimmune. Your immune system is attacking the nerves in your spine. And it's something that's related to multiple sclerosis. Now, what multiple sclerosis means is multiple times your spine or your brain has been demyelinized. So when that happened a second time for me, then I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So twice, once before I had my children in 2004, and then a second time in 2008 after I had my children. I had the second event, and then they confirmed MS. But my family doctor at 2004 basically told us that that was going to be in my future, and so to definitely have my children before I couldn't. A relaxing, remittent kind of multiple sclerosis might be in my future. So in 2008, when my children were 2, I had the second event and was officially diagnosed by neurologist, in addition to my family doctor, with the autoimmune disease. And I started doing research around what causes the autoimmune disease. And right around this time, they were doing these studies about these adverse childhood events and their relation to immune diseases. And they did it both with men and women. It's both across both genders, an increase in autoimmune diseases with these adverse childhood events. So for me, you might wonder, well, what are these adverse childhood events? For me, one of the things that happened to me on a few occasions is that my father attempted to molest me, and did molest me in a way, with, for example, exposing himself, etc., when I was young. And I was put into a situation where I had to protect myself from him for 6 months, when I was alone, basically, between the ages of 15 and a half and 16. I was with him and my stepmother, who my stepmother had no reason or desire to protect me. And I lived every day having to protect myself from my father's sexual advances. So, as you can imagine, after going through that for 6 months and being in constant fight or flight, I didn't even sleep well at night. He forbid me to have my door locked. I found a gun. I slept with a gun under my pillow. I've had a very traumatic and upsetting childhood, that, I'm just touching on things, and, they're absolutely horrific, which is why I'm not going to go into any details. But I believe that it was this childhood and the fact that once these things happened to me, there was no talking, there was no healing, there was no open discussion. What happened is, in my family, is, oh, those horrible things. We don't talk about the horrible things. We don't talk about the bad things. And so I was never allowed to bring it up. And when I did bring it up, people ran away. I was like the bad person that brought up the bad things, To this day, if I bring up something uncomfortable on text, I won't get responses. It just, they just don't say anything. My family does not know how to deal with these complex issues and deal with these emotions. And so I never got the help that I needed until I was old enough to know and learn that I needed help myself. And it was basically the physical symptoms that got me there. And meanwhile, I was having emotional symptoms all along, emotional symptoms that led to unstable relationships with boyfriends, that led to risky teenage behavior, all kinds of ways I was acting out because I had CPTSD, but I didn't realize it. When you're in your own head, you don't realize when your thinking process is different than it normally should be, especially when that thinking process is altered in your childhood. In your adulthood, you might realize it more, right? You might realize, like now, for example, I realize that I have had a mental decline due to the amount of medications I'm taking, and maybe due to the amount of physical stress I've had on my body. I am not as smart as I used to be. I know that. I can feel the difference, you know. It's somewhat upsetting, but I'm grateful to be alive. And that's what I focus on my gratitude for being alive. But again, I digress. So what I want to say, what I want to talk about is how much that childhood trauma impacted me. And, you know, I think not, and then the not talking about it. And I think that is like almost bigger than the trauma itself, was the not talking about it, the not being able to bring it up. I not being able to talk about how I felt when I wasn't believed, you know. Yeah, it's so, you know, today, if there's someone in your life who is dealing with this trauma and it's going on, the best thing that you can do is talk to them about it and say, I'm here. You can just talk to me. You can just, you know, whatever you want to say, you can say it. I'm here to listen. That's probably the best thing that you can do. And don't worry about trying to solve anything. Your job would just be to listen, and that would be the best thing that you can do. So that's something that you can do. Now, if you're in my situation where you've been through this kind of trauma, you have to do some work. And I've been doing work to get the trauma out of my body and heal from CPTSD. If I didn't heal from the CPTSD, I would not have a stable marriage now. So I had to do that to be able to have stable emotional relationships in my life, and also to be a good mother to my children. So in fact, it was a blessing that I got sick with the MS, and the MS made me dig in and find out that I was affected by these childhood traumas, and so that I could start dealing with them and becoming more aware of how my trauma impacted the way I think and behave and the way my body responds to trauma. So I'm still working on it. You know, I recovered from the multiple sclerosis only to come down with multiple myeloma, which is another immune disease. So, you know, I tend to feel like I still have more to process. I suggest things that I've used, like EFT. So that's like the tapping and hitting on these meridians. And you can look it up. It's E as in Edward, F as in Frank, T as in tapping, or the word tapping. And doing that while you're thinking about things that are upsetting you, while you're crying about something, helps remove that from your nervous system, helps to remove that trauma from your immune system. There's also something called EMDR, which involves either looking back and forth, or other people do it where you cross body. These sort of movements while you process trauma can really help you, can help the physical body process the emotions. And definitely talking about it, journaling it. These are all things that I'm doing that I'm hoping are going to aid in my physical healing, as well as keeping me more psychologically healed. So, if you've made it this far, you are one of my core viewers. And so I'm going to share something with you guys. In less than 2 weeks, or in about 2 weeks, I guess, on August 13th, I have to go down to North Carolina to testify, because my father, who abused me, is trying to get his sentence reduced. My father is currently serving a 20-year sentence. We made sure to try to get him into prison because he was still abusing. We knew of children who were in his life that were showing effects that children show when they have been sexually molested. And so due to that, we pushed really hard, even though he is in his 70s, for him to be in prison and away from children. It is a possibility for me that I could do that testimony over Zoom, but I am concerned that I won't be as effective, and I won't be as effective with the judge who's making the decision about when to let him out of jail if I'm over Zoom and not in person. So even though this is going to be happening right during my chemo treatment that I'm restarting up, I'm going to be getting chemo every 2 weeks. And so I'm going to have to work my chemo around a trip to North Carolina. It is really important to me that I do everything I can to try to keep him in prison, because there are still children in his orbit that people were allowing him access to. So that is why it is so important that he stays in prison. And so I also wanted to ask if anyone would be willing, who has been helping me through this whole process, would be willing to help me prepare my impact statement. If you're willing to do that and made it to this point of my video, you are a real one. I love all of you, but I especially love you guys that made it to this point, and I appreciate you all so much. And please, over the next couple days, I'm going to start writing something. I may put up a video. If anybody wants to help me, I can just make it to private and share it with a few of us. And then we can maybe refine what I say. I mean, it's the most important thing is that I want to stress the impact that the things that he does have long-term on people's health. It's not like nothing to do this to a child. It has long-term impacts. And I want to really make sure that the court knows that. I feel like, especially now with everything going on with the Epstein files, I feel like pedophilia in general is being dismissed as not being important, is almost being like a victimless crime, It's like, so what? The girls grow up and yeah, they may become, so what? They become titty dancers because they have no self-worth. So what? Who cares? I mean, that's what it feels like to me. They feel like it just doesn't matter. And there were literally thousands, over 1,000 victims. And so between having to go down and testify to keep my dad in prison and all this Jeffrey Epstein stuff, if you can also just keep me in your prayers, keep me strong. I have a good supportive family around me. I have a great husband and children. And I have you guys too, and I just appreciate you all so much. Thank you, and I love you.